Hello, this is Unsung with GameLeap, and in today's video, we're going to be going over the patch 14.1 mid lane tier list. 14.1 has completely shaken up the mid meta, and with the new season comes new picks. The new map with the new terrain as well as the new item overhaul has really made assassins a lot stronger, while reducing the effectiveness of the traditional control mages. If you've been watching our videos for some time, you would know that this is something that we assumed would happen, so it's nice to see some of our speculation pay off. As always, this tier list is going to be geared for those of you that are under diamond that are looking to climb, but the information provided will be applicable in every single rank. Let's go ahead and get right into it, starting off with our C tier. Unfortunately, even with the new items that are in the game, Ryze is still a mediocre champion. This champion is simply way too hard to pilot effectively in lower elos, and he requires too many items to get off the ground. These statements are going to be why the majority of the champions in C tier are there. AP Kai'Sa isn't a bad champion, but she needs a huge amount of items as well as game time in order to be useful. AP Varus unfortunately falls in the same boat. Neferi has also received a hotfix, but compared to the hotfixed AD assassins, as well as the prevalent AP assassins, she is by far the biggest loser. Now that we've covered the C tier, let's go ahead and talk about the B tier. This is where we're going to place Yasuo and Yone. Let's go ahead and start with Yone, as this champion is quite controversial. Lethal Tempo has trivialized Yone's early game and made him into a scaling bully instead of his previous weak early game, okay mid game, and then a really strong late game profile. What really breaks this champion is not playing him in the mid lane, however, it's playing him top lane with the old version of Hullbreaker. In Season 14, the current iteration of Hullbreaker that we have doesn't provide us the bonus resistances and the other free stats bundled into one concise package. The new wider version of mid lane, as well as the removal of Hullbreaker, leave Yone far more susceptible to bullying. This champion is still really strong on Kraken Slayer, but compared to all the other assassins that are really good right now, he does actually lose a lot of lanes unless you're able to walk up and cheese your opponent at level 1. While Yone's win rate has gone down in both mid and top lane at the start of Season 14, I do believe that once people understand that this champion's build path is more damage centric again, that it will stabilize eventually. Average champion through and through. Now let's go ahead and talk about Yasuo. Yasuo actually has a fantastic win rate bot lane and then a mediocre win rate in both top and mid lane, and this is much for the same reasons as Yone. Unlike Yone, Yasuo was abusing the Iceborne Gauntlet build, which has also been removed from the game. The current iteration of Iceborne in Season 14 does not grant the damage reduction as well as the mythic passive, which made it so valuable in Yasuo. Now we're forced to go Kraken into the shield bow, much like Yone, which is a more damage-centric punishing build to go. Yasuo has an incredibly difficult time into some of our picks in A tier, S tier, as well as in OP tier, so it's pretty obvious as to why this champion is here. Moving away to the AD champions, I do want to mention one more champ, and that's going to be Malzahar. Malz has a fantastic synergy with the new item Malignance. Mal's ult is already pretty hard to deal with as a squishier champion, but when he's frying your eyeballs with that Malignance puddle underneath it, it is really hard to survive this combo. This champion sits in this tier because despite this synergy, Malz does really struggle with getting off the ground. By the time that we purchase our item, usually the game is already over, and Malzahar is not a champion that's capable of snowballing. Malz at best goes even in lane unless our opponent fails the IQ check. Any champion that relies on our opponent's incompetence is not going to be a great pick for climbing in solo queue. Instead, they're going to be pretty mediocre. That being said, it doesn't mean that these champions are completely unplayable, they're just simply harder to get the most out of, which is why they're rated lower in this tier list. If you're a very passive player and you enjoy a scaling playstyle and you don't mind a game or two getting away from you here and there, then I do highly recommend Malz as a champion. He's just not going to be the easiest, most effective way for you to climb. That's going to sum it up for our average tier. Let's go ahead and talk about A tier. Just a quick reminder, if you want to learn any of the champions on this tier list, such as Yone, then head on over to GameLeap.com where we have the best tips videos to get you onto Summoner's Rift as quickly as possible. You won't have to spend hours in practice tool learning combos, we've already done the work for you. See you on the website. The A tier champions are going to be champs that are a little bit less flawed than the ones that we talked about before. Either these champions will have a super strong niche, i.e. Cassiopeia into the hypermobile assassins that are very prevalent, or they're really effective at doing one thing and one thing only, Azir and being a control mage. These champions are going to be better than the ones in B tier, primarily due to how they scale inside of a game or how they fit a general team composition. Victor is a great example of this. This champion does okay with the new items, he's really strong when he's able to get off the ground, and he fills a mid to long range carry role. That doesn't mean that Victor does not have bad matchups, however, especially into the really snowbally, volatile S tier picks that we have in this patch. While Victor is not a bad champion per se, these matchups will heavily skew his placement in the tier list, despite some of the more obvious advantages that Victor does have in Season 14. Unfortunately, even for the best Victor players, all it takes is one errant shark from a fizz to completely shut you down, and the removal of stopwatch prevents you from getting out of jail for free now. This will also be the case for champions like Twisted Fate, Talon, and Zed. Zed is another champion that I always like talking about in these tier lists because Zed's overall placement will reflect the health of the game as a whole. As you can see, Zed is sitting in the middle of the pack, which does say a lot about AD assassins on this current patch. Zed is good, but only after the hotfix buffs that he has received, but he is not nearly as strong as some of the picks in S tier, which we're going to be getting to in just one moment. Talon unfortunately falls in a similar vein as Zed. While this champion does have a huge propensity to snowball, I would not recommend him over a lot of the other assassins on this list, simply because one mistake on Talon will end your game. Now that we covered the A tier, let's go ahead and talk about the S tier and then the OP tier after that. Now in S tier, we have champions that are going to be influential in their games, as well as somewhat easier to pilot than most. The Season 14 meta has treated all the champions in S tier well, and some of the picks that we see in this list have not been strong for quite some time. Katarina is a great example of a champion that has been positively affected by the Season 14 changes. I personally am not of the opinion that Katarina is a strong champion in high elo. I do feel that Katarina is very weak, and this is largely due to how terrible her matchups are. A case like this is where the new map comes in incredibly heavily. The new Void Grubs that spawn in 5 minutes give topside a new objective, and this is perfect for champions like Katarina. Even if we're a champion with a bad laning phase, if we reset before that 5-minute mark and then we're able to contest the grubs, we will have infinitely more impact over a game than we would previously. As a melee mid, if we get pushed underneath our turret, we're actually not losing much anymore because we can always bounce a wave and then hit a reset and then turn that into a grub fight later on. If our opponent plays the lane correctly and forces our wave to push into them, we'll always be the first one to rotate towards grubs or towards our jungler. This newfound importance of early game has opened a huge door for Katarina because we're able to snowball and affect the game so much earlier, and it's guaranteed to happen in every single match. We also don't have to worry too much about lane because the new itemization changes will help us in any and all snowball capacities. If we want to play AD cat, then we can pivot into that. Blade the Rune King into Terminus is great on this champion for the sheer amount of damage it's able to output. If we want to go a more expensive AP build, then we can, because Amptome is now 400 gold, which means that we don't have to have awkward bases anymore. The awkward AP itemization that we had before is largely gone because the cheaper new items as well as new options that are available to us. Storm Surge has amazing synergy on Cat. Rocket Belt is a decent item for this champion early game. Nashor's Tooth has been buffed to have a better stat line, and it's way easier to buy because of the cheaper AP components. Regardless of what your preferred build is, Katarina is eating really good this season, and it's largely because of these new map changes, which is exactly what we wanted. Akshan is another huge winner of this patch. I would have him in OP tier if he wasn't difficult to play. I was 100% right in my observation that on hit was going to be broken this season, and Akshan is a great indicator of that. Kraken Slayer into Blade of the Rune King Akshan has a nearly 57% win rate. Voltaic Cyclosword into Collector Akshan is also pretty strong, and so is Blade of the Rune King into Terminus Akshan. Regardless of what you want to build on this champion, it will be a strong option that will hyperscale you. Akshan in this patch is amazingly good, really versatile in what he can do, and he can round up basically any composition because he's an additional AD carry that does a heavy amount of mixed damage depending on our build. Now that we talked about our S tier, let's go ahead and move on to the OP tier champions, the ones that are really shaking up this patch. Okay, Corki is suddenly in OP tier instead of in C tier. Why is that? At the very start of the patch, Corki was the lowest win rate champion in the mid lane in the entire game. He received some small hotfix buffs, and people have had more time to learn about proper itemization on this champion, and now he is in a truly disgusting state. As of right now, I'm rated in the top 300 players on the North American server, and the build that I'm starting to see quite frequently on Corki is Eclipse into Sork Shoes and then Muramana completed after that. We want to buy a tier on our first base ideally so we're able to stack it for our Muramana later on. After that, Rapid Fire Cannon and then IE seems to be the way to go, and we have a nice mix of both a caster and auto attack reliant playstyle. What's really dumb about this build, however, is the sheer amount of damage that the package does. I watched somebody get killed 100-0 by sitting on the package for a quarter of a second. This wasn't just a squishy champion either, this was a Bruiser Viego that itemized some magic resist, so they should not have been one shot. Corki is really good after the hotfix buffs. If you want a great counterpick to the majority of the other champions in OP tier, then I highly recommend that you pick up Corki, and that is his primary reasoning for being placed so highly on this list. He has amazing matchups into the OP champions. Being capable of one-shotting people with just your package also does help. Next up on our list is going to be Akali, and this one is a no-brainer. If you have played against Akali at all on the current patch, I'm sure that you understand just how disgusting she is. Akali's build path of Rocket Belt and then Sork Shoes and then Storm Surge after that is just disgusting. If Akali ever lands an E on you, you will die. If Akali ults onto you and procs the Storm Surge, you're going to die to the R2. If Akali breathes a little bit too hard, then you will also fall over instantly. I'm sorry, it's just the way that it is. This champion is highly illegal on this patch, and if you're an Akali main, I'm sorry, but you should be sent to prison. You need to be abusing this champion as often as you can. She is utterly disgusting if she snowballs at all. Also, don't ever build Void Staff on this champion, always build Crypt Bloom. Trust me, you will thank me later. Kennen is another candidate that we have in OP tier, and this is also for obvious reasons if you played against him on the patch. Much like Akali and most of the other champions on this list, Rocket Belt into Storm Surge is the way to go to unlock war criminal levels of damage. This is going to be a common theme with the rest of our OP tier. Like Corki, Kennen has great matchups into the other OP tier champions, but his burst and teamfight ability is just so gross, you can pick him into basically anything and it'll work out. Diana is in this tier for the same reasons. She is really tanky, she's capable of beating all the other OP tier champions, and then she has that disgusting itemization of Rocket Belt into Storm Surge. Please play these champions in your placement. If you're a mid-man, you will place much higher than you did last season. Now onto Vlad. I never thought I would see the day where I would put Vlad in OP tier for a climbing tier list, but this champion is dummy strong on this patch. Bruiser Vlad is making a comeback. I'm seeing a lot of people go Ionians into Riftmaker and then Leandries. There's also some people that are going Cosmic Drive immediately into Storm Surge for a similar power spike to the other champions that we talked about before. Vlad still does have the issue of having a poorer early game, but the focus on grubs allows us to leverage our sustain to heights that we weren't able to before. If we don't in lane keep up with harass and we're able to bounce a wave, then we're going to be very healthy for these grub fights, and then one rotation is all it takes to kill someone in the early game, especially when we have a jungler helping us whittle them down. Even if you lose one of these early game spikes, Vlad's 2-item spikes with the Riftmaker Leandry build is just completely disgusting, and this champion will delete anybody that he comes across. Really strong on this current patch. Play him if you like scalers. Nico has been broken for a long time, and a lot of people have dropped her because she's just really boring to play, which is hilarious. This champion since her rework has been one of the biggest balance outliers I've ever had the misfortune of seeing, and she continues to stay the same on this patch. Much like the others, Rocket Belt into Storm Surge on Nico, her damage is already illegal as is, but once you get these items, it is highly illegal. And finally, in my opinion, the two biggest winners of this patch for climbing, and that has to be Echo and Fizz. Much to everyone's surprise, you want to go Rocket Belt into Storm Surge on these champions in order to get the most out of them. Echo is the safer option, Fizz is the option that has the higher reward. Fizz is just disgustingly broken on this patch. Dear lord, I have not seen Fizz be this strong since about season 3. One kill for Fizz in the early game will result in an absolutely agonizing experience for any squishy in a 5-mile radius. The really funny thing about Fizz on this patch is that you don't have to hit your E to kill somebody. Instead, use your Q into W and then Storm Surge will do the rest. It's like having a super AoE Lichbane that's basically always up. This champion is just really cringe and insane broken. You need to be playing him or banning him if you're not. Echo is much the same at the same item spike, but Echo's lane phase is way safer than Fizz's because we don't actually have to interact with the wave that much. We can throw our Qs and clear the wave safely if we have a bad matchup or if we are against an opponent that has longer range than us. Unlike Fizz, Echo won't kill you instantly for being out of position from level 3 onwards though, which is why we have him rated 1 slot less. Echo actually has to land some harass and set up the kill instead of, just killing them instantly when they enter the lane at level 3, which makes him weaker by comparison in a solo queue environment. The team-wide AoE stun and the get out of jail free card on the ultimate definitely do help though, and Echo is a very strong champion on this patch. Anyways, with that, we're going to conclude our patch 14.1 mid lane tier list. I hope that you guys all enjoyed this, and as always, I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.